This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life. Welcome to the Inkpulp podcast. I'm your boy. I'm your host, Sean Crystal. Today is a very academic, educational episode. I'm going to talk about page design as applied to comic book art, how to lay out your panels essentially, or I'm going to look at three artists. It's not necessarily a how-to. I'm exploring one theory. There are different theories on page design and how you should approach it, and ask any artist who draws comics. They're all going to have their own religion they live by. And I certainly had mine, but I'm changing it and growing. But this is about simple page design. I was talking to Eric Canetti. Sorry for so much ums. And he really got me thinking, because Eric's page design is very simple and straightforward and easy to follow. It follows a grid, it follows an order, lots of horizontal panels like a movie screen, but that's not why. And I was always very fascinated with complicated page design and interesting page design. Let me show you how well I can design a page. Like, that's ego. But what Eric was saying is, we as a medium in this country need more readers. And there's the most uninviting thing about a comic book to a new reader right now is probably the page design is confusing. They look at a comic, they're like, no one's taught me how to read that. I can't read that. That doesn't happen in Japan. And it's also, I think, the bigger publishers are jamming so much story into such a little book. It's so crowded with information, with word balloons everywhere, tons of characters everywhere. It's just not an inviting thing. So, but what Eric was talking about was just page design. It's like, I want someone who's never read a comic to be able to pick up a book of mine and be able to follow along very easily. And I always thought, well, isn't that going to bore them? But no, because if you look at Eric's work, inside the panels, there is dynamic information. But I'm going to cover that in the podcast. I'm getting way ahead of myself. This is just the intro. So I got a page from Eric Canetti. I got a page from Bruce Timm. I got a page from Matteo Scalera, all of whom are using a simple and effective page design. Now, my goal here is to talk about why and how it works, and hopefully get you thinking and teach you about stuff you'll do in your comics. Again, I want you to know me as a teacher, and I want you to explore Inkpulp instruction, link in comments. Go get yourself a free lesson. Go purchase a lesson. When this podcast comes out, I think I'll have 3 lessons available, or 3 episodes available, continually building. By the end of the year, I'll have 6. By the end of next year, I'll have 12, and so on and so on. No, scratch that. I'm doing mini episodes too. So at the end of 22, there's probably going to be 20 episodes. So we're building, and those, of course, will be cheaper. But I want to I'm creating a means to teach young artists or veteran artists to hone their skills even more in areas of illustration, comic book art, tattooing, whatever it is. There is a focus on comic book art, but this applies to many media. That's all I'm saying. So enjoy the episode. Let me know in the comments. Did you learn something? Was this valuable? Let me know. Peace. Welcome to the Inkpulp podcast. Today I want to cover simple and effective page design with you. How to lay out your panels, essentially. So first up, I'm going to go through 3 pages. So first up, I've got a page from Bruce Timm, one of my favorite artists, from Batman Black and White, which to me is an invaluable resource. It's a great tool for inspiration and constant education. I think it's a shining example of the medium of comics at its best, Volume 1 I'm speaking of. And it is a collection of some of the best artists, best storytellers, best writers, best designers, best everything, celebrating black and white form of the medium, which I love. So let's talk about this. So Bruce Timm, what we have here is a simple grid foundation. So the first thing we have to understand as storytellers is how we in Western civilization read. And we read left to right first, then top to bottom. So we are basically following this pattern through the page. Now, I've spoken to my friend Eric Canetti about this. We're going to go over one of Eric's pages in a second. And Eric feels, and I think he's right in this, I went down a rabbit hole of complicated page design, breaking this idea of simplicity. And Eric and I talked, and Eric finds that very uninviting to a new reader because they're not sure how to go about this. And there's some real validity to that because we're trying to bring in new readership now more than ever. So I think it's something to consider. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do really interesting page design work like the Eduardo Risso page we covered, but it's just something to think about. So Bruce Timm is basically saying, this is how we read. I'm going to follow that format. So if we get rid of the artwork and we're left with the panel borders, it's really a simple means of following how you're going to get through the page because of the direction we read in. So someone might say, let's say someone's saying, well, do I go this way? Well, I guess that's an option, but remember, that's not how we read. This is how we read. So it's really following a very simple means of doing so. And if we look at also here, and this is something to pay close attention to, is where the word balloons are placed. Notice these two are up here tied to each other. And again here and here tied to each other on the same sort of latitude line or longitude, I don't know. Same tier, and of course here. So the first thing our eye tends to gravitate towards is the word balloon. So these word balloons also help us effectively navigate the page. Because if we go from, all right, I'm going to read this first. Am I more likely to come down here or go over here? The way we read would say go right. But also because these are at the top, they relate to each other better. And because of that relationship, it's easy to navigate. So I think Bruce has created a very simple, easy to navigate page design. And when we look at just the panel borders, we can see it for what it is. All right, let's move on to Eric, who I've talked about already. So Eric, who I said, is really following this idea of let's not make it complicated. Let's make it easy and inviting for the reader. Well, if we go back to Bruce real quick, you can see the level of confusion that could arise comes in right here. Do I go down or do I go across? Eric has really capitalized on the idea that I'm not going to deal with that problem as much as possible. Now, if you've got like this page, which is 6 panels, and if they're... So what Eric's doing, let me back up a second, is he's creating horizontal panels only. So it's very clear, you know, I'm going to go from this panel, read it across, come down and do it here. There's no panel I have to navigate in between that. It's a very easy navigation system. So, but you've got a 6-panel page here. If you were to do 6 horizontal panels, your window of space to see in is very small. So there's going to be times we're going to have to break away from that, or Eric will have to. And I think he did something really smart here. So let's come back to this. So then he comes down here. Of course, I'm going to go... I've already established this rhythm of across, 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 and I'm going to follow that here, and then go across here, and then down, across, and across again. Now, one thing I find that Eric did that's really smart is these 2 panels don't line up here. So it's easy to associate these 2 panels as a tier and these 2 panels as a tier. Versus Bruce, where we could have that level of confusion. Again, I don't think it's a big problem. I think it's really easy to solve. But what Eric did is kind of ingenious, because by having these two panels next to each other, but the gutters not line up, allows me to associate this panel and this panel as on a tier together, and this panel and this panel as on a tier together. Really effective, really simple, really smart work. And I don't want you to make the mistake that creating a simple grid or a simple panel layout means that it's uninteresting. I think that's a mistake I might have made. Eric's saying, let's make the panel layout simple, but what we see within the panel very dynamic and interesting. So if you just look at the page here that Eric has drawn from Enter the Mandarin, Iron Man, it's classic. The camera angles are really dynamic, really interesting. He's moving the camera around a lot. Here we've got, a nice Dutch tilt. Our horizon line is about here. Here we're looking down at the subjects. And the cropping, the danger of the birds hovering over these small figures. I could go on into the storytelling. That's not what this is about today. Let's do that another time, though. Make a mental note. That'll be dope. But my point is, it's a very dynamic page to look at, but very easy to read. What you don't want to do is have a dynamic page that's hard to read. And I think that's something we all have to really consider and think about, especially in this day and age of comics. When you pick up a lot of books, it can be confusing. So let's move on to the last page of today's podcast. So this is another close friend of mine, Matteo Scalera, and this is from Harley Quinn White Knight, written by another close friend, Sean Murphy, and his wife, Colleen. So, Matteo's following again, sort of a combination of what Bruce did and what Eric did. So we've got the horizontal panels, which are great compositions. They make us think of a movie screen, and if you study cinematography at all like I do, and I love movie photography, there's so many beautiful compositions that lend to a rectangle. And then down here, he's got the Bruce Timm feel. We've got two panels the same size, and why am I not tempted to go down here? Why am I thinking this is the way to go? Because these two panels they share a relationship in terms of size and space. And then the last panel with no border over it is a bleed. And bleeds are great. They can just be tricky if they're not used effectively, but I think Matteo really used it very effectively here. And it's an ending moment. It's a closing moment for a page. So why frame it in time and space? You want to give it a more timeless feel, right? So yeah, that's basically it. Just a simple, quick overview of simple, effective page design. Things to think about, things to consider. Good luck with your making comics.
This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.